So I'm Jennifer Grover. This is my son Jeffrey.
I'm in 6th grade. I'm 11.
This is Michael. He is also 11 years old. And this is Joshua, who is 15.
I'm James, and this is our daughter Emily.
I'm 18. I'm currently attending Brigham Young University. I'm a pre-animation major.
This is our daughter Lauren.
I'm 14 years old and I'm in 8th grade.
And we're missing Bree, who's 16, and she should be here about this area.
Brianna is at marching band. It's marching band season, and so we don't get to see her very often. Yep, we are missing 3 other people. Jacob, his birthday was just this week. He would have been 10. And Joseph and Bronson. Bronson is 7 and Joseph is 14, and they are in the Democratic Republic of Congo. About 15 years ago, our oldest was 4, and then we had a 2-year-old and a 9-month-old. And I just started feeling very much that there was a little girl that was supposed to be in our family that was not going to come through us biologically, and that we needed to go find her. I had lived and traveled kind of all over the world. I grew up in the military, and I had come to love different cultures and countries and people, and I very much wanted to bring that into our family and into our home. And so as James and I started talking about it and moving, we knew nothing about adoption. We knew nothing about international adoption. So it was a step-by-step process to figure out what the next step was, how we went about adopting and bringing home a child from across the world. As we started looking into different countries, we talked with other people, we talked with adoption agencies. We went to the NIS for our fingerprints with one country in mind. And as we spoke with that officer, we came away with 2 things. And one was that we really needed to talk with our younger children about this before we moved forward. And the other was that the direction that we were going with the country was not right for us. There was another country that we were supposed to look at. So we went home, we took our children to the park, and we just started talking with them and playing with them. And Emily was 4 at the time. And we said to her, we have found out that there's a little girl across the world that doesn't have a mommy and daddy. And without any hesitation, Emily said, I know, why don't you go get her and bring her to our family and you can be her mom and dad? And that was our answer. And it has just been easy with our kids ever since. As we've added to our family through adoption, they have embraced all of their siblings regardless of how they came to our family.
I've had the experience being the oldest through all of these adoptions. You know, I've gotten to remember most of them. I don't remember tons of details of Lauren's, but I remember lots about Jacob and Michael's. One of the biggest things that sticks out to me is I remember when we were still in the process of adopting Jacob, we had a video of him, and my mom and the family were all watching it in the family room. I remember one day when we were watching it, my mom comes and stands next to it, and she just goes, how can you love someone so much that you've never met? And that's just, that kind of envelops the whole feeling that I have towards adoption, just that you can love someone so much and realize how important they are to your family. And I'm just so grateful that I've gotten to experience that.
Surprise! What? How'd you get here? How did you get here?
It's a different way of bringing home a sibling. It's just like if your mom came home with a baby from the hospital, it's just like that, except they're a little older and from a different place. So that's just my view on it.
Well, I really think adoption is nice because I think because children who don't have parents, I think that that's kind of a really sad thing. I feel like they're my actual siblings, and I also really like it because Michael and Jacob, they were really cute, and I really like them as my brothers. I'm going to be sharing a room with Bronson, and I'm really excited for that. And Bronson has like the biggest smile ever.
Some of the things that were interesting with Lauren, our first adopted child, at that point, we'd had one miscarriage that hadn't really been a part of our lives. We had all of our children biologically, and so when we started the adoption process for Lauren, that was an interesting thing because it wasn't really something that we had discussed or talked about before. We felt really strongly that she was out there and that we needed to go find her. During that time period, while we were in the process of adopting her, we had all kinds of things go wrong.
As you always will with adoption.
Yeah.
Expect the unexpected.
Job loss, Jennifer became pregnant. We subsequently ended up losing that child. But as we were going, we just kept feeling like, are we still supposed to do this? And we couldn't deny that, yeah, she's out there, we need to go find her. And so as things came one after the next, we just knew we had to go get her.
So we finally knew that she was in Kazakhstan. And so when we had come through the orphanage, they didn't want the American parents to see the children that were sick, so they had taken her to a back room. And when they thought we were through, they had brought her out.
So Lauren and this other girl were in the same crib.
Yeah, the little girl that we were drawn to, that we knew we had to meet, she was Lauren's crib mate, and that was the connection there. And as soon as I saw Lauren, there she is, and it was an instant love and connection, just a recognition. She was ours. And so we were with her in the orphanage for 2 weeks, and then we went to court, and then we were required to leave the country for a legal waiting period while they placed her information in the newspaper to see if there were any Kazakh citizens that would like to disrupt the adoption and adopt her.
Because if anybody stepped forward from Kazakhstan, then it would stop our adoption and we wouldn't be able to adopt her.
The day we left was very difficult. Not only did we know we were going to be away from her for several weeks, but I could tell something was not right and that she was not feeling well. So that was very, very difficult to leave her. And what was supposed to be 2 weeks ended up turning into 6 weeks because she and the other children in the orphanage had chicken pox, and the orphanage was put on quarantine, and no one was allowed to come or go. And that was very difficult as we were trying to get information on her well-being, how she was. We were told very, very little. And we were up at his grandmother's funeral on a Friday, and we got the call saying, you better be in Moscow on Monday because she'll be waiting at the embassy in Moscow. And you need to be there to meet her. So she was taken to the Moscow embassy, and James flew to Moscow. I stayed with our younger children at the time.
Something that's interesting with that call, just to give you an idea of the kind of things you experience. They said, we hadn't given you any updates because we wanted to wait until we knew something final.
A definite.
A definite, that's what it was. And we asked what definite was, and I guess it was whether or not she was going to survive. So
she'd gotten very,
they hadn't
very
told
ill.
us, and we didn't even know that she was very ill. And so I guess they were waiting to see if she was going to survive. So that was an interesting thing.
She'd gotten very ill, and they did not have the resources to take care of the children. So she had fevered quite badly, and it had caused some brain damage as well. And so he went to Kazakhstan, Moscow, picked her up, took her through the embassy, and then came home with her. And she looked so different from having been sick. I thought he brought the wrong child home.
She really thought I'd brought the wrong child because she was 10 months and she could barely hold her head up.
She weighed 10 pounds.
Yeah, she weighed 10 pounds. The experience coming home from Moscow, we were both covered in bodily fluid because she couldn't keep anything in either end. And so we went that whole trip with just constant cleaning up because she had some pretty severe health issues that needed to be taken care of. But then you realize it was her.
Yes. It only took a few
Seconds.
minutes. Yes, and then yes, this is our baby. So Lauren and I have talked a lot about her birth parents. We've talked about your birth parents, haven't we? We've talked about how she had to come through another woman because she had to have her beautiful dark hair and beautiful brown eyes, and she wasn't going to get that from Dad and I. So she needed to come a different way. But we talk about how much her birth mother must have loved her to give her the opportunity to come to our family.
It just seems really cool that I just started with the whole adoption.
You started it all. So then, how we found our others. So then we lost 5 babies in total through pregnancy, at various stages throughout the pregnancy. That was very difficult, and we had Jeffrey. He was kind of our little miracle.
Jeffrey born after Lauren.
Yes, he was biologically ours, and so he was born after Lauren, and then we lost several more, and then I just started getting that feeling that it was time again, and that there were more. And so one day I was doing laundry, and I got the distinct feeling that it was time, and it was time now. I told James, he came home, and I said, I have someone I want you to meet. And I showed him Jacob's picture, and it was a go. It was from there, and as
Jacob has trisomy 21, so he was in China, but the process was much faster because of the fact that he has trisomy 21 and has special needs. So we didn't have quite as long to wait there as many other people experience when adopting from China.
Start to finish for his adoption, because he was a special needs adoption, was 9 months.
One of the things that was really difficult with Jacob during his adoption, we were close to the time that we were supposed to go travel, and we received notification that Jacob was extremely ill. And then we received notification that he seemed to be paralyzed down one side of his body, and that we were not allowed to travel. That was like...
Our suitcases were literally by the front door.
Yeah, so we were ready to go, and then they called and told us, you can't come. And then they went into Chinese New Year, and we couldn't get any information on him. We didn't even know if he was surviving, if he was alive. We just knew that he was apparently paralyzed down half of his body. It's better when you do this. They asked us if we still wanted to adopt him. It was a crazy thing. It's just a strange question. Of course we did. We just wanted him home. So anyway, we waited for more information, thinking that he would come home paralyzed down the entire side of his body. But then he started to recover. They didn't really know at the time what had happened with him. And so it wouldn't be until later when he came back that we found out that he had a disease called Moyamoya disease that affects the vascularization of his brain. But he had suffered a small stroke, and it had affected part of his body, but he regained a lot of the left side of his body.
Yep. He remained weak with his left hand and had some ongoing issues with that. He came home and within a month was in brain revascularization surgery. But
I think that's actually one of the toughest things about international adoption is your child is so far away and you have very little information on their well-being, and it's really hard to get that. And then when you find out that they're not well, that's really tough.
when we went to go pick up Jacob, they introduced us to Michael, who also had trisomy 21. They were best friends in the orphanage, and Michael had always taken care of Jacob. The orphanage workers told us that he was like a big brother. So we came home and immediately started his adoption. These two little boys needed to be forever brothers, and Michael needed to come to our family, and we're so grateful that he found us.
Yeah.
We didn't find him, he found us, and that's been an incredible experience. After Jacob had been home almost 3 years, he had had brain revascularization surgery on one side, and things looked stable on the other side, but the doctors felt like they needed to wait before doing any surgery till his veins were a little bit stronger and bigger. And he, on December 12th of 2013, he suffered a massive stroke. And 3 days in intensive care and brain surgery, everything they could do wasn't enough. And on December 15th, he passed away. And it's been a very difficult 18 months. He was our glue. He held our family together in ways that no one else could. And he was our sunshine. And to have him gone is very, very difficult.
Jacob brought light into all of our lives that I couldn't even begin to describe to you. Jacob's the family favorite. All the brothers and sisters, everybody, Jacob is the favorite. And he brought just such intense light into our lives. One of the things that I would tell you about the adoption process is there are things that can be amazing challenges, amazing pain. Losing Jacob, I can't begin to describe. Waiting for Joseph and Bronson to be able to come home, I can't describe that pain. But I will say that the joys that are associated so outweigh that. They're just a huge order above. I would go through everything we've gone through with Jacob a million times over to have the years that we had with that beautiful, beautiful boy.
With Joseph and Bronson, once again, I started about 3.5 years ago getting that feeling. It's time again. There's 2 boys that are supposed to be yours. And I had been getting emails. I just felt like I was supposed to open this one email in particular. And usually it goes to the profile of that child when you open that email. And when I opened that email, it went to a page that had about 6 little boys' pictures on it. And when I saw Bronson's picture, I knew instantly that he was ours. James was at work and I didn't even call or tell him. Before I even got out of bed, I had sent our information to the adoption agency saying, he's ours, match us. And they did, which was very lucky that the timing worked out, because that afternoon his picture was featured on a newsletter that went out, and the agency was flooded with calls, but he was ours. And he was matched. There was no going back. And it was just about a day or 2 later that we saw pictures of the other children in the orphanage, and that's when we saw Joseph and knew that he was our son as well. He was the second one that's supposed to be part of our family. And we started that adoption process. We were through court in about 6 months. They have been legally ours now with an adoption decree for about 2.5 years in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But about 4 months after we received our adoption decree and we were waiting for the U.S. to process their investigation and their U.S. visa, the DRC placed an exit permit suspension on 4 adopted children. And so they have been waiting for 2 years with that suspension on to come home. And that's been extremely difficult.
That's probably one of the things that I mentioned that's very difficult with international adoption. There are many things that we've talked about that we consider to be a blessing, like the fact that they have other cultures that you bring in and just different experiences that you have there. One of the things that's also nice is that once they're adopted and in our family, we don't have to worry too much about things being undone. Sometimes you hear about that with domestic adoptions, things being revisited. But one of the biggest challenges is you have other governments involved. And certainly with our oldest boys, meaning our most recent adoptions, that has been an enormous challenge, because there's very little, although the U.S. government's been very involved, there's very little that they can do. And we're kind of at the mercy of another government to let our boys come home. And we've been waiting over 2 years now. There's something interesting with waiting for Joseph and Bronson. 2 years, like I said, it's brutal. I don't even know how to describe that.
Well, and you add the time for processing, and we've been working on their adoption just under 3 years. It'll be 3 years in a month.
It's always been difficult, as Jennifer indicated before. You love your child as soon. With Lauren, we loved her before we knew how to face. I mean, you did. It's hard to explain. I guess it's a lot like loving a child who's still during pregnancy. But we love Joseph and Bronson, having just the idea of them and seeing their pictures. But then we went over this past January, and I've held my boys. I've held them in my arms. And it's so difficult, but they're my boys. They're my sons. There's no way you can give up.
That is one thing that is very common with adoption in general, but specifically at international adoption, is you need to expect the unexpected. We have not had an adoption yet where there has not been something unexpected take place. As you know, we've mentioned before, job loss, pregnancy, illness, issues with our government or other governments. There is always something that will take place. And it's very easy to become discouraged, but don't. It works out okay. In the end, it really works out. The most difficult part, definitely the waiting.
Yeah, the waiting's really brutal. Waiting, not having very much information, that part's really hard. Also, the lack of control. There isn't anything, at least in my life, that's more important to me than my wife and my children. And to have so little control over my children's lives and their protection and their safety, where they're maybe halfway around the world. That's really brutally difficult.
You have to give up some of that control. And that is a very difficult thing to do as a parent. You also have to be willing to open your lives up for investigation to social workers, to adoption agencies, to governments, yours and other government entities. And you will be providing a lot of your personal information.
We've joked that I think it'd be easier to get top secret clearance than it is to get permission to adopt internationally because of the amount of information that you give up by yourself.
Yes. One thing that I wish that we had known a little bit more before we adopted Lauren, that we kind of were blindsided with, was attachment and bonding issues. I was under the mistaken impression that the younger a child was, that the less likely that they would have issues with attachment and bonding. And we found out that was not the case. And we were kind of blindsided with some tough attachment and bonding issues when Lauren came home. She had bonded with us very well while we were in the orphanage. And then when we had to leave her, and she got so sick, she went through some re-abandonment issues. And then had some cognitive disabilities as a result from her illness. So when she came home, it was very difficult for her to bond with us. And so as we were learning about her and researching and trying to find books and information available for adoptive parents on attachment disorders, that was a dark, difficult time.
It was really hard. Nobody had really told us about like reactive attachment disorder, and so we would take things personally. Lauren, when she came home, she would cry and scream when we would hold her, and she would stop if we'd put her down. And then eventually she got to where she would even prefer, that's one of the things that goes with reactive attachment disorder, she prefer other people over primary caregivers. And so that was difficult because you take it personally and you think, what am I doing wrong? I'm giving you all my love, and you don't seem to want to be around me. We would even, when she would eat at night, we would have to put her plate down and not make eye contact with her, because if we made eye contact, she would scream. And so it took a lot of time and love, and we finally, without anybody really giving us guidance on it, because we didn't know about it now, I think the information's more available, but we just decided we're just going to love her regardless of whether she wants it or not. And so we'd hold her and she'd scream and cry, and now she's a cuddle bunny. I mean, she loves to be held and things, but it took a long time to get through that.
When a baby cries in their initial year, they're crying because they need something. And when that cry is met with a primary caregiver feeding them or changing their diapers or holding them or giving them whatever they need, attachments are formed. And when a baby cries and nothing is done to help them with their discomfort or address the issue of why they're crying, they start to sever that need for anyone else to take care of them, and they turn into themselves to take care of themselves. And that is why they feel very threatened when someone then comes on the scene and wants to be the primary caregiver. And I didn't understand that. And so I took it very personally. I loved her with my whole heart, and I felt like she didn't love me back. And that was very hard. We went to therapy, we found therapists, we read books.
One of the other things that I would mention is also be very careful to never lose hope in the face of whatever anybody else might tell you. With Lauren, as Jennifer mentioned, she suffered some cognitive challenges because of the illness that she had. And we were once told that she might eventually be able to identify colors. I think that was the extent
Just know her alphabet and count to 10.
That was the height of what she would ever grow to be able to do. Well, you've seen Lauren. She's doing great in school. She has all kinds of interests and talents. And certainly, it would have been easy to give up and just accept that. But Jennifer, has made sure to work there and help her.
No one can fight more for a child than the mom. and you have to recognize the potential that your child has and fight for them. And then with a team of teachers and administrators and just really wonderful people who've loved Lauren, she is doing beautifully. And we can't imagine life without her, without any of our children. With each child that has come home, you anticipate what to expect when they come home, and then they come home and you can just throw that all away, because when they come home, they have their own unique set of circumstances, their own needs. With Jacob, we thought we were adopting a 5-year-old, and we were, but Jacob was more like a toddler. And so he came home and there was massive baby proofing that needed to take place. He was very active.
That was a different experience. When you have biological children, they slowly start adding abilities and being able to get around the house, and so you go, okay, I need to put something on that cabinet. Suddenly we had a child with all these physical abilities, but his cognitive level, he was into everything. We had to instantly baby-proof our house.
He was known as the more active one in the orphanage.
Yes, they said, oh, when we told them which child it was, they said, oh, the more active one. Yes, that's our Jake.
And I wouldn't have had him any other way. When James and I got married, when we were engaged, we talked a lot about what we want our family to look like. And I had pictured 7 children. They would all look like him, and very similar.
A boring family photo.
A beautiful family photo, but that is not the family photo that we were supposed to have. And our family photo looks so different than I ever envisioned it looking, and I wouldn't change it a bit. It's perfect. It is perfect.